I knew the storm was coming the second she strutted into the Willow Creek Estates HOA boardroom, clutching that iced oat milk latte like it was the gavel of justice itself. Decked out in a pastel polo with the HOA logo embroidered a little too prominently, and white sneakers that screamed, "I never mow my own lawn." This was Karen Whitaker, our beloved president, the self-appointed guardian of curb appeal, and the woman who once fined a guy for having Christmas lights up past January 15th. She didn't even sit down before firing the first shot. This, she said, flipping through the bound report I'd spent 6 months crafting. Looks like it was made by someone who still uses Microsoft Word. Laughter rippled loudest from the treasurer, who'd once asked me if bylaws was a type of bread. I didn't respond. I didn't even blink. Just sat there, palms flat on the folding table, watching my work, meticulously aligned compliance matrices, resident privacy checklists, state-mandated disclosure templates get shredded for the crime of not being raw enough. No one wants polished anymore, Karen sneered, tossing the report onto the floor like a bad script. They want real grit, emotion, not this corporate museum piece. This feels like an obituary. There it was. The rest of the board chuckled, some a little too hard. Someone actually muttered, "Oof." I caught the vice president smiling uncomfortably like he'd just watched a waiter drop a wedding cake and couldn't decide whether to apologize or order dessert. That report was supposed to roll out next quarter. I timed it to coincide with the new California HOA Transparency Act requirements. Every public communication funded by dues had to carry full disclosure language under Section 9.4. I'd spent nights reworking every sentence so we'd be bulletproof. But none of that mattered now, because Karen had decided authenticity meant throwing state due diligence into a blender and hitting TikTok speeds. And hey, before we go any further, 97% of people who listen to stories like this don't hit subscribe. If this already pisses you off half as much as it did me, smash that like button and subscribe. It's free, but it really helps the channel that brings you these real HOA nightmares from the edge of suburban hell. Back in that room, nobody noticed me quietly close my laptop. They were too busy listening to Karen workshop new campaign slogans out loud, like she was riffing on a podcast. What if we do an unscripted mini-doc series? Residents talking about their lives, no filters, just vibes. A junior board member nodded, like she'd just witnessed the birth of cinema. Another homeowner asked if we could get someone crying on camera. I stood slowly. Someone asked where I was going. I smiled but didn't answer. Truth was, I'd been here before, not just in this boardroom, not just in this neighborhood, but in this exact situation. Flashy new attitude, president-level charisma, and the kind of viral genius that forgets contracts exist. The last time that happened, the association got slapped with a 6-figure state fine for improper fund reporting. I learned then to keep copies of everything. So I walked out with my dignity intact and one folder on a USB that no one thought to check. They thought they'd kill my project. What they did was amputate their last legal safeguard and hand me every receipt I needed to remind them what real actually costs. I didn't slam drawers or storm out with dramatic flair like some neighborhood martyr. I just packed silently. One by one, I pulled out the pieces of a 6-month strategy built to thread a legal needle so fine it gave our association attorney migraines. Campaign architecture, resident consent matrices, approval trails for every dollar of dues money. All of it. My hard drive didn't scream. It just blinked calmly as I exported copies to my personal secure vault. They thought I'd leave it all behind like some rejected volunteer with a Canvas subscription. What they didn't realize was this wasn't just a neighborhood rebranding campaign. It was a legal shield, the kind you only get once you've danced with the California Department of Business Oversight long enough to know they don't give warnings twice. Behind the beige walls of the community center, I heard the new strategy taking shape. Karen's voice, smirking as usual. We'll reroute the beautification fund. Pull from the reserve account. Nobody checks those numbers. They just want pretty videos and good press. The treasurer who once asked if we could make compliance less fonty chimed in. And if they push back, we say it was community outreach. Boom, narrative shield. I paused mid-keystroke. Not because I was shocked, but because I'd heard this before. Not the same words, but the same rot. A few years back, another golden child rerouted dues from a sidewalk repair fund to pay for influencer partnerships. We got audited. The board blamed the landscaper. The landscaper lost his business. That was the moment I started reading the fine print with a vengeance. So now, as I exported the master folder labeled transparency_plan_4, I opened the state statute one more time. Section 17B, disclosure requirements for any public-facing content funded in whole or part by association resources. There was buried beneath 2 pages of legalese like a tripwire waiting for someone smug enough to sprint barefoot through it. It didn't say don't be creative. It said disclose all funded creative assets, flag alterations, and submit final versions for archival approval prior to distribution. You know, the usual state CYA lingo. And Karen, she had just publicly torched the only version that complied. I didn't highlight it. I didn't annotate. I just saved it, flagged, time-stamped, and backed it up across 3 clouds and a hard drive I kept in a fireproof box under my sink. Because I wasn't planning revenge. I was preparing truth, the kind that doesn't scream, doesn't chase clout, and doesn't need a single follower to carry weight. They had just thrown away the one thing keeping them compliant. And soon, someone with more authority than me was going to ask, why did you remove the only approved disclosure? The first video dropped on a Thursday at 9:03 a.m. A grainy, overexposed clip of old Mr. Henderson from 1422 Elm choking up while talking about how the HOA gave him a second chance after his wife passed. Unscripted, uncaptioned, no disclaimers, no funding tag, no legal sign-off, just raw, shaky footage stitched together with lo-fi piano music and a hashtag that made me taste blood. Real life Willow Creek. By noon, it had over 200,000 views. By Friday, 1 million. Karen walked into the next board meeting like she'd just baptized the entire subdivision. This, she announced to anyone within earshot, is what authenticity looks like. No filters, no suits, no bureaucracy, just truth. Someone clapped. Someone else asked if she'd be doing a TED Talk on neighborhood management. The vice president looked like she'd just witnessed the resurrection of Steve Jobs, except in a cropped denim jacket and HOA lanyard. They were riding high. The analytics dashboard lit up like a slot machine. Shares, reposts, neighborhood sentiment through the roof. The new social media volunteer sent around a spreadsheet with fire emojis in the subject line. Karen walked by my desk that afternoon, grinned without stopping, and dropped. But you never got those kinds of numbers. I sipped my coffee. Lukewarm. Bitter. Perfect. See, numbers were never the problem. Not for me. I've been in the room when we got the state grant approval for community engagement. I was the one who presented our outreach plan to the oversight officer. I was the one who wrote the transparency addendum for the campaign brief. Karen never even opened it because Karen wasn't here for the process. She was here for the splash. And like every president who thinks she's too charming to drown, she just jumped in without checking for sharks. The second video was worse. Some young mom from the cul-de-sac crying about how the HOA saved her from foreclosure. They'd edited in cartoon foreclosure stamps over her family photos. I recognized the edit style immediately. It was the same volunteer who still thought copyright was just a suggestion. No media releases, no internal flagging of disclosures, and absolutely no indication that this campaign had been born from dues tied to mandatory state transparency programs. It wasn't just unvetted. It was radioactive, and it was everywhere. I didn't speak up, didn't warn anyone. I'd already done my job. They'd stripped the compliant version and replaced it with viral candy, saccharine, empty, addictive. The kind of campaign that burns fast and dirty until someone remembers to ask, "Wait, who paid for this?" So I sat at my desk, irrelevant by design, watching the internal praise spiral into full-blown worship. Karen pitched a documentary next, a podcast, a TikTok duet series with residents sharing trauma. Legal didn't even get a preview. She said they were vibe killers. Every win was another inch of rope. Every repost another knot. And me? I just sipped, smiled, and waited for the fall. I wrote the email at 2:11 a.m. Not out of anger. I wasn't pacing or muttering or dramatically deleting drafts. I was calm, surgical, even had a glass of water, a clean screen, the glow of the monitor casting everything in grayscale, the way a moor must feel just before dawn. Subject line, Project 34, Public Disclosure Concerns. No fluff, no drama, just precision. I addressed it directly to Monica Reyes, Senior Compliance Analyst at the California Department of Business Oversight. We'd met once. Quiet woman, sharp eyes, the kind of person who noticed when files were renamed 2 seconds apart. She'd signed off on our original transparency framework nearly 18 months ago, and I'd never heard from her again, which meant we'd done it right. Until now, I attached 4 files, disclosure summary PDF excerpted and highlighted from the state contract, original approved plan.zip, full export of the campaign I built, time-stamped metadata intact, current public material.zip, the viral content Karen greenlit, scraped in real time from all active channels, and timeline deviation report.xlsx, side-by-side comparison of what was submitted versus what was launched, when, and by whom. No commentary, no accusations. The only sentence in the body of the email read, "The current public campaign diverges materially from the approved and filed transparency plan under Grant 34A. Please advise." Then I clicked send. That was it. I didn't expect fireworks. Monica wasn't the type to reply with exclamation marks or threats. That office doesn't scream. It audits. It builds binders. It picks up the phone to the state attorney general. When I stood up, the air in the room felt different, cleaner, lighter. Not from righteousness, not from vengeance. Just the clarity that comes from knowing something dangerous is no longer your burden to carry. I walked to the window and looked out over the cul-de-sac. The dark rows of minivans that wouldn't be moving for hours. Somewhere inside that community center, Karen was probably sleeping off another celebratory kombucha, dreaming up new slogans about truth and impact while the legal landmine she never bothered to map sat right under her feet. I wasn't thinking about revenge. I was thinking about gravity, because sooner or later everything falls. And that email was the exact weight it needed. It came at 6:27 a.m., exactly 2 hours and 14 minutes after I hit send. My phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize, probably her assistant's cell, rerouted or borrowed in a scramble. I almost let it go to voicemail. But something in me, maybe the part that used to care, maybe the part that just wanted to hear it, answered. Dead air for a moment. Then Karen's voice cracked like a windshield after a brick's been thrown through it. "What have you done?" she whispered. Not shouted. Whispered. That was the first time I'd ever heard her unsure of anything. I didn't reply. Let her sweat in the silence. You could hear the hum of some speakerphone in the background. Muffled voices. Legal probably. Maybe the treasurer. I imagine her in the corner office she'd renovated with dues money she never disclosed. She'd humiliated the woman who built the association's first compliant outreach program. Now surrounded by half-eaten, gluten-free muffins and whiteboard buzzwords that were about to get subpoenaed. "They've called for a review," she said. stumbling over the words like they were in a foreign language. The agency, Monica Reyes, said we violated something with the funding disclosure clause. She sent a formal request for all campaign records. Unredacted. There it was. Confirmation. The vice president doesn't even know yet. She continued, voice rising now like panic was finally catching up to the bravado. Legal's losing it. Compliance is throwing terms around like fraudulent representation. They're asking for timestamps, backups, who authorized what, and Christ, they're asking if anything was registered. Was I supposed to register the content? Wasn't that your job? I didn't smile. Not exactly. But something in me exhaled slow and steady, the part that remembered her waving off every document I tried to show her. We'll go rogue, she'd said once, like she was auditioning for a suburban reality show. You didn't, I replied calmly. You skipped registration. Review. Sign off. You went viral without vetting. Silence. Then desperate. We can fix this, right? Just tell them it was miscommunication, that we were aligning the campaign. Say it was draft content. You still got the old files, right? Tell them it was part of the plan. I looked out the window where the first slivers of morning were slicing through the skyline, sharp as razors. I open files for those who pay, I said. Another silence. This one deeper. She understood. Or maybe she didn't, but her pulse did. Because this wasn't about a campaign anymore. This was about money, about state dues. And whether someone like Monica would flag this as administrative negligence or deliberate obfuscation. You don't understand, she tried again, voice trembling now. This could take the whole board down. They're saying if it's confirmed. If we broke Section 17B, the grant gets pulled retroactively with penalties. I do understand, I said. That's why I emailed her. Click. She hung up, and I stood there for a long time. Not triumphant, not angry, just still. Because I hadn't burned anything. I hadn't broken protocol or leaked a single word I wasn't supposed to. All I did was show someone what they already had the right to see. Turns out truth doesn't need a filter, just needs a subject line. The letters hit inboxes before most had finished their morning coffee. Not a whisper, not a rumor, just a formal PDF stamped with the seal of the Department of Business Oversight and the kind of wording that turns caffeinated optimism into career dread. Immediate requests for internal documentation pertaining to Project 34. Use of association-funded communication channels. They didn't send one email. They sent 23. Direct, specific, time-stamped, addressed by name. Karen's name was on all of them. By 8:17 a.m., the community Slack went dead. Not just quiet dead. The meme stopped. The digital high-fives vanished. Even the Daily Morning Vibes thread in Willow Creek shit froze mid-emoji. Someone tried to react with a thumbs up and got nothing but buffering. The president had entered the community center half an hour earlier wearing aviators and holding 2 phones. By 9, she'd locked herself in the boardroom with legal. 5 people followed her in. 3 came out looking like they'd been asked to explain nuclear physics in a language they didn't speak. At 10:03, legal sent out an internal hold order. All personnel are instructed to cease public campaign activities related to real-life Willow Creek until further notice. Someone from the Welcome Committee removed the Congratulatory Neighborhood Facebook post about disrupting how we tell stories. The association YouTube channel switched half its videos to private. And the Mr. Henderson crying montage vanished like it had never existed. But the most telling moment? Heather, the former compliance officer, mid-40s, glasses always slightly askew, fired 3 months ago in a strategic streamlining, walked back in like a storm cloud in Sensible Flats. Someone had reactivated her badge. She didn't speak to anyone, just beelined to her old cubicle and began unpacking a small box of files. The only sound was the click of her keyboard and the whispered, "Oh shit," that followed her down the hallway. Karen came out an hour later, pale and sweating, her polo untucked in the back like she'd run out of ways to look composed. She pulled the social media volunteer aside. "Is something about backup approvals?" Then sprinted back to her office when the volunteer said, "You told me not to send anything through DocuSign." Spin wasn't working anymore. Her narrative, rogue genius, rebel creativity, we move fast and break stale rules, had collapsed under its own weight. There are no signatures, no compliance marks, no fallback documents, just metrics, mood boards, and vibes. That's when my notification pinged. "Calendar. You've been invited to initial clarification session. Project 34. Sent by legal department." It wasn't a request. It was a summons. And suddenly I wasn't just a ghost with files anymore. I was being pulled back into the fold. Not because they missed me, but because I was the only one left who'd done it right. And in that still moment, sitting alone at my desk with the blinds drawn halfway against the noon glare, I realized the silence wasn't isolating anymore. It was gravitational, pulling them all back toward me, one signature at a time. The room wasn't the same one where Karen had humiliated me. This one was smaller. No glass walls, no catered breakfast trays, or HOA buzzword scribbled on white boards. Just a long table, 7 people, 3 laptops, and 2 state observers who didn't smile once. Heather was already there when I walked in, stone-faced, every file color-coded and clipped. Monica Reyes sat across from her, calm, unreadable. Legal counsel on both sides flanked the table like chess pieces. The only empty seat was mine. I didn't speak until I was asked, and when they finally did, a mess. "Vargas, would you please walk us through the timeline?" I didn't clear my throat or hesitate. I opened my folder, turned my screen toward the group, and said simply, "This is the plan that was approved. Slide 1, title page of the original campaign proposal. File metadata in the corner timestamped. Slide 2, side-by-side asset breakdown. 1 column labeled compliant assets approved, featuring the polished, legally vetted visuals with required funding disclosure footnotes. Next to it, public live assets unauthorized raw, unapproved footage with missing release forms, altered statements, and no funding tags. Slide 3, email chains, legal approvals, compliance forms, all for my project, cross-referenced, archived, signed. On the viral side, nothing but Slack screenshots and media file names like Henderson Guy, Final Cut. The silence was absolute. Even the HVAC system seemed to hush. Then from the corner, "That video, it was funded?" one of the observers asked, pointing at the paused footage. "Yes," I said. "Through reallocated association dues originally earmarked for transparency initiatives. No disclosures, no registry, no archival backup." Heather handed them a printed packet. Every point I made confirmed. I didn't ask how she got it. I already knew. Heather doesn't delete anything. And then Karen barged in, hair disheveled, sweat along her collar, trying to bring that same swagger that had worked in every previous meeting. "Sorry, I need a moment. There's context here." Monica didn't look up. She just said flatly, "You are not authorized to speak in this session." Legal followed, a mess. "Whitaker, this is a compliance meeting, not a PR debrief. But they're making this look like a cover-up," Karen said, her voice rising now. It was a campaign pivot, not a crime. And then the fatal question from the state rep. "Do you have written documentation approving that pivot?" Silence. 1 beat. 2. Then without waiting for a reply, "Please step outside." Karen stood frozen for a second, blinking like someone who'd finally felt the air leave the room. Heather tilted her head toward the door. She left, and no one stopped her. The rest of the session was surgical. No emotion, just facts. I presented the cost breakdown, what we were funded for, what we delivered, and what had been hijacked in the name of authenticity. I showed how my plan aligned with state requirements down to the font size of the disclaimers. I showed what had been lost when my project was trashed. And for the first time in months, no one rolled their eyes. No one laughed. They listened. They took notes. When I finished, Monica closed her folder, looked at legal, and said, "We'll need formal corrections submitted by end of week, and a revised disclosure report for all public-facing materials posted after June 2nd. I nodded once. Already drafted. And in that still moment, I felt it, not triumph, not vengeance, just gravity again, but this time pulling everything back into place. It was the vice president this time. Not a handler, not legal, not an assistant pretending to care. Just him calling me directly like he hadn't avoided eye contact for 3 straight quarters. His voice was lower than usual. No voldrom polish. Just a man trying not to sound like someone begging. "We need the original plan," he said. "No pleasantries. No small talk. The real one, the one you submitted." I let the silence stretch just long enough to remind him who set it all on fire. Then I said, "Which version are we is asking? The version that laughed me out of a meeting or the one that just got flagged for potential grant fraud?" To his credit, he didn't try to charm his way through it. Didn't defend Karen. Didn't pretend the campaign hadn't become a legal liability with a ticking deadline. He just said quietly, "We made a mistake. I made a mistake, and I need your help to fix it." I could have asked for anything, a title, a raise, a formal apology read aloud at the next annual meeting, but none of that interested me. I didn't want noise. I wanted control. One condition: I get full authority over the rollout. Unedited. No interference. My plan top to bottom. I want a direct line to legal, and I want a public retraction of the previous campaign on record, published on all channels. Silence. Then done. The next morning my badge worked again. It didn't beep twice. Didn't stall. Just turned green like it had been waiting for me. I walked past the front desk without a word. Took the elevator up to the admin office and found my nameplate already reattached to the door. My inbox had been reactivated. 300 unread messages. Most of them panic-lay CCs and looping you back in desperation, but I didn't touch any of that. I opened the original project folder and got to work. That afternoon, an internal memo went out. Effective immediately, the previously released real-life Willow Creek campaign has been formally retracted. All promotional material will be replaced with the state-approved rollout plan under Project 34. Oversight will be led by Elena Vargas, compliance coordinator. The next line was short, but it was the one that made the entire subdivision pause. Karen Whitaker is on extended leave. Effective immediately. No farewell post. No press release. Just silence where her voice used to echo. In my office, I reviewed the timeline I'd built half a year ago. The campaign that was never meant to go viral. It was meant to inform, to align, to protect the association from exactly the storm it had walked into eyes wide shut. They'd thrown away for clicks. Now they were crawling back for cover. And I wasn't angry. I was patient. Because the thing about doing it right the first time, eventually they remember where they left it. The posters went up quietly. No launch party. No pop-up booth with branded kombucha. Just overnight installs, simple designs, muted tones, real residents in crisp, dignified light. Every department, no, every block represented. No tears, no shaky iPhone footage, just steady camera work, clear consent forms, and a single line printed at the bottom of every asset, created in accordance with California HOA Transparency Act guidelines, funded by resident dues under Grant 34A. The new campaign didn't chase you down with hashtags or force itself into your feed. Didn't need to. It spoke softly, clearly, and truthfully the way legal documents do, the way people trust. Digital banners rolled out next, updated on the website, the resident portal, the welcome packet pages, A unified neighborhood image that actually reflected what we were, not just what we wanted to trend for. Residents started sharing it, not out of obligation, but out of quiet pride. That surprised me. They weren't performing for engagement. They were just sharing. Then came the final asset, a short film labeled Real Life. Real rules. Just under 4 minutes. Voiceovers from 5 residents. No music swelling behind the words. No scripted breakdowns. Just clean language about what they do, why it matters, and who it impacts. We didn't try to make it go viral. We submitted it to the Department of Business Oversight for archival approval. 3 days later, I got an email. No bold text. No drama. Just Monica's name in the sender line and one sentence. Thank you for preserving integrity. Your file is closed. I stared at it longer than I meant to. Not because I needed the praise, but because it meant something rare. No further action required. No audit extension. No press inquiry. No damage control. Just done. That night, I stayed late, not out of obligation, but because I wanted to see it through. Every screen in the community center was playing the new campaign on a loop. And as I passed by one of the monitors in the lobby, I caught the reflection of the final frame, a welder from the back block wiping his brow. The text below, this isn't a campaign. This is the truth. And I smiled. Not loud, not smug, just satisfied. Because real was never the problem. Just a guy to define it.